Alrighty. Let me fix this quick. And okay, the stuff should be on, but I'm not sure if I just kicked everyone off the stream.
No, it just pops back up afterwards.
Does it pop back up? Alrighty, guys.
Yeah.
Then welcome back. Sorry for that intro. I simply misclicked on end stream instead of like I should take a screenshot. There's like a little bit of a volume button to see, and I thought like, oh, I can click this still, right? And I just misclicked on the end stream thing. So it's like, right. Well, mistakes happen, as we all know. So let me introduce you guys real quick. Some big names today. So first guest has been on a couple times, actually 3 times before, and like every time I'm like I really enjoy it, so I thought I invite him back on. Originally the idea was to get you and ProGod back on actually after the war, but the war kind of dragged on, you know. It's like has been a while, so I actually invited you guys back on, but you couldn't make it, and so we switched it up and had ProGod on, and now Killah is on. I want to say one of the best known and well respected FCs in the game in the current era, I would say. I think that's fair to say. Not super active right now, but always a little bit involved, right?
A tiny little bit at the moment. But yes, hello. Thank you for inviting me again.
Yeah, and by the way, if someone's listening, wondering, I think it was episode 41 where we talked to ProGod together with ProGod about the war, and it was just coming up. Because I think maybe at the moment that's kind of interesting to listen to now that the war is in kind of full swing and stuff. Like what we're talking about? I don't even know. I don't even remember exactly what we talked about, but you know, it was episode 41. And then second guest, a little bit of an old timer that recently came back. Mr. V is probably better known by like the older part of the EVE population. I'm not saying real life old, but like EVE game time old, right?
Veterans.
Probably both, to be quite honest, right?
It's okay, you can say that now. There's FCs in Gunsform that are like 17 years old now, so that makes you feel old in real life.
It has been a while, right?
So
that's like from back when like double-digit Titans were still mind-blowing, right?
The good old days.
And V used to be the main FC for at least the Euro part of the Imperium, or back then CFC. So to give you guys an idea, I think that distinction of Euro and US time zone, CFC or Imperium, that doesn't even really exist at this point anymore, right? I'm not quite sure, to be honest.
I would say it always existed to a certain part, but it does feel like the people who ran the show in Gunsform on the FC level have always been, like as an FC, you have to be pretty no life, right? So you usually span at least 1 time zone, usually 2 time zones to be super active. So way back when I was a student, I could cover EU and US, but usually the US time zone FCs also cover Euro when it really matters. So we all kind of know life.
Yeah, true. Like if you like the guys on the top, they're usually the no-life guys, 24/7. It's like always available, which is a little crazy. But yeah,
that's the plight.
Timeline-wise, I'm not even sure. Like we talked about that super shortly when I said like, "Hey, let's talk about that," and Killah already answered it kind of a little bit. But I wondered how much of your activities like overlapped back then, right? I know right now it kind of overlaps, but like before, like you came back. Like, so how much?
Oh, you mean back in the day?
Yeah.
I mean, there was like, I think V went sort of inactive when I became active, when I started, it's like after I joined PL from Nully. And then V, I remember I did 1 fleet versus V, and that's like the only fleet I ever did against him, and that's it. After that, I think he went pretty inactive. Was
that the only one?
I think, yeah. I mean, at least that I remember. Yeah, I remember that, but you know, it was It was not
I-
exactly an even playing field back then.
I clearly remember that there was a long time when I was kind of like, I wanted to be active, but like what I like to do, my play style, there wasn't really any like space for it. There wasn't really a lot of opportunities. I was always like on the fence for a long time. Like I kind of wanted to play, but I wasn't really having a good time. And then at some point, try it again. And then I remember pretty clearly losing that fight to you because I was pretty salty about that. And then after that, I lost the fight to Elo, and then I was like, you know, screw this game.
let the young guys take over.
Wait for a couple of years.
It's time for retirement.
Yeah, but I think Killah
Everybody on our end was always pretty excited when it was signs of you coming back, and like back when World War B1, you did a couple of fleets, and then there was like a time in between when there was like signs of you showing up for a couple of fleets, and every time you like did one ping or something, people in our Intel channels and FC channels went like crazy. Oh, look, V's back. This is huge. This changes everything. And then most of the time you would just do a couple of fleets and then disappear again.
Yeah.
This time around you actually stuck around, so that's great because it's always great seeing the old. For me, when I was not an FC yet, like when I sort of grew up in EVE, you were like really active and well known already, and that was kind of a benchmark. It was like you and Elo were basically the people that I guess there were like big FCs that I was kind of looking up to when I thought about becoming an FC. Obviously, I had a lot more contact with Elo because I was in BL back in the day. But
you were in BL as well.
Yeah, I was in Black Legion in
Nice.
2011 to 13. So there was time I was still going to school back then, so it didn't really matter what I did in terms of like my sleep schedule and stuff. So it like literally every night I would set my alarm clock to like 3 a.m. my time in Germany, so I could go on Elo's 0200 fleet that he did every day, right? Like, and I did that every day. It was just my sleep schedule shifted around to a point where I got up at like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. Then I went on an Elo fleet, and then after the fleet I went straight to school, and then I came back from school and I just kind of went to bed and then woke up for the fleets again. It was pretty try hard back then.
You nerd.
You gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah, pretty much.
I'm surprised. Is that one fight? Was that the only one we did against each other?
I think so. Yeah, I can't remember fighting you ever since.
You must have been like super excited then.
I was. I remember my first fight against Elo as well. That's why I think I would remember having another fight against you. I think that was the only one we ever had. Because after that, I can't remember. I had like 1 or 2 fights against Elo. And both those times I was like, oh man, this is like fighting my mentor sort of thing. He didn't really mentor me, right? But it was like finding my role model or whatever you want to call it. It was both times I was
You're coming
going in.
Fight.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, like the time I fought Elo, I was already pretty confident in my ability because that was I was running the show for PL for quite some time at that point, and I felt pretty confident about myself. But when I fought you in Delph, I hadn't been in PL for that long at the time, and I was certainly much more exciting than the other time.
Yeah, I guess
you dropped Titans on me, right? I think it was that.
Yes. Yeah, you were doing Macarials, and I think I did A-Hex, and then when I got a bunch of scrams on you, I just dropped Supers and Titans.
Yeah, filthy.
But, so, like, but you said, like, by then you were pretty confident. Like, I think there's a moment where you just realize as an FC, like, everyone kind of is cooking with water anyway, you know? There's only so much you can do. Like, you need to know all these options and stuff like this. And I think for, like, someone starting out, it's, like, too much, maybe, right? But as soon as you know the meta, and you're pretty sure, like,
yeah.
you know, like, there's only so much, like, a super high level FC could do to your fleet that, you know,
everyone cooking with water thing, that's a big deal, though, because I know this very well, because before I joined PL, there was always these huge, like, conspiracy theories of what PL was involved in and what PL did actually orchestrate, and, you know, the whole sphere thing, which obviously everybody knew it was a meme, but it just kind of spun into that. And then there was this giant mystery about PL, what's going on inside of it, and blah, 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 at least for me before I joined. And then when I joined, I realized, well, this is just an alliance like every other alliance. They had an amazing infrastructure and everything, granted, but it was nothing that special. And then being in PL and seeing, you know, knowing how those decisions were actually being made, and then seeing the theories on Reddit and seeing everything around it was just so funny. I think that was the point where I realized when I joined PL, I realized that everybody's just cooking with water, right? Like there's none of that shit is going on. The most of the stuff that people think is going on in like the dirty back rooms with the smoky cigars or whatever.
Were you a
90%
little
also-
disappointed?
At the poker tables.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah.
most of that isn't happening. I wasn't disappointed. No, I was kind of relieved because I always thought, man, I'm way too stupid to come up with all this shit. I'm hoping I'm not actually that dumb. And I was like, oh, it seems like I'm not actually that stupid. People just think these dudes are way smarter than they are. I'm not calling anyone stupid, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I always thought, so we have a long history fighting PL and all that stuff. And Shines, who's also in chat actually, knows, like, I was always mad about people going to PL to give them free intel. I was always so mad about that. I'm like, these guys, they're just sitting around, and just because they're PL, they have that name and everyone looked up to these guys. That's why they wanted to work with them. They wanted to deliver them like the free intel on shit.
Yep.
Right there, right? So I was always so mad. It's like there was such an advantage always, and I always felt like people, they wanted to be friends with PL. You know what I mean? They wanted it too so bad. They would give them like whatever they wanted. Right? It's like,
Yeah.
and I would
Yeah,
always.
that
That's
was
the thing about.
definitely true.
I think that's the thing about that's kind of interesting about PL. Like I'm actually really happy that I was in PL for a couple of months, way back, like when after the whole thing happened in Fountain and PL lost the region and they lost. I don't even remember how many titles. It was not that many in the current scale, but they were very low. And then Shadow came back and he kind of resurrected the alliance and started doing the armor hacks and stuff. And then he invited me to join on Alt, so I got to see the inner workings of PL. And actually, I think you have to be like, it's a very specific kind of atmosphere in there at that time, at least, where there were so many people in PL who knew exactly what needed to be done at any time. And every decision made by NFC was also challenged by so many people in the fleet. And there was the whole like old guard and the new guard challenges. And I realized at that point that an alliance like Goonswarm, for example, fit me much more because at that time, at least, I'm not sure if the differences are still that big, but at least at that time, like goons are really easy in the sense that if you have a cool idea and you want to try something and you just tell a bunch of people like, hey, we're going to try this, they're very obedient and they will just happily follow the orders and they will try it without question. And if it fails miserably, then they're like, oh, well, we died, whatever. But in PL, if you wanted to try something like that, you had to be pretty dominant personality to ram it through with the people there. And
Yeah, and I think that just has to do with the reputation on the line, right? That's why I think groups like Goons, Tests, Brave, or like any group or Horde that started as like a newbie group and was open to everyone to say like, yeah, we kind of shit at the beginning, right? There was no pressure on FCs, right? They can just go, and if you wipe a fleet, that's expected. But what if you win? Like, what if you win outnumbered?
Exactly.
Then the other guys are like, they're getting hurt, right? It's like, that's a whole nother level. And it's way more fun to make that shit skill group win suddenly, right? Than, if you're in PL, at the time at least, you had to win. Like, there was no other, like, it was unacceptable to lose a fight, I guess, almost, right? Yeah. I don't know, to be honest. Like, I was never in PL, so
losing fights was pretty harsh. I remember there was a lot of, because at that time that character was very low skilled and Shadow was doing armor hacks, right? And I couldn't fly an armor hack, so I was flying a Mauler. And then the old guard was like, this is unacceptable. A T1 cruiser in our hack fleet. Completely unacceptable. Our reputation is at stake here. And then the new guard was like, who gives a shit? Like, he's a friend, whatever. Like, just let him fly his Mauler. And there was like this clash of the old versus new, and it was like really like, it was actually like a thing back then. Yeah. But what I noticed that I think is pretty interesting, if you look at like coming back after a break, I don't know if you guys have noticed the same thing, but I feel like there's a very big difference in like the local chatter and like the smack talk in local between like the people who've been here for a long time and kind of the newer groups that were recently formed or recently. I like, for example, I barely see like NC Dot and PL like smack talking in local anymore, because I guess by now we've all met each other in real life, right? We've all done the rounds, we've all had our spy characters, and we know that everyone's kind of just a dude playing the game. But then I think you see like the bit of newer players that are in the younger alliances. They're still like really fierce in local, and they're really trying to drive their point across that the other guys are the bad dudes. Have you noticed that too? Because I think it's really funny to see actually.
I think I have noticed that too. Yeah. What I think though is like those people that want to smack talk in local, or that would smack talk, they're still in NC and PL too, but in like I think the average person in those groups now is like it's not acceptable on a social level. You know what I mean? Not I wouldn't say acceptable, but like people don't like it in general in their groups. And that's why they don't shit talk, rather, right? Like, I think those people that would shit talk, they still exist, though, right?
You think? Or maybe we just all
I
got
think
a bit
so,
older.
yeah.
And we're like...
I don't know. Maybe we have to do a scientific study on it.
Little local analysis on the smack talk.
Yeah, I mean, Brave is a fun example, right? They always have the slogan, and we're fighting them at the moment. I'm not trying to shit talk Brave, but they always say like stay classy, right? But they have some really shit personalities there, like that shit talk so dumb, right? And they don't care one bit, right? But I guess that supports your point, right? Like the newer groups, the newer people, a higher chance they have a higher chance of actually having that low level shit talk.
So I enjoy it. Like it's good that there's that level of emotional investment, right? Because that really keeps the wars going.
That is also true, yeah.
And I remember like way back, like for us at least from a Goonsform perspective, like Vince Draken was like the embodiment of the bad guy, right? Like he's the NC Dot. He's the leader of the gang that's the formerly Band of Brothers Corporation. So he's the evil dude. And nowadays it's like, oh hey, Vince is also back. That's cool. Let's just chat in local like we're friends or something.
Yeah, Vince is actually also on my list as like a guest for a future episode. But I don't think he's not the podcaster.
Has he ever been on a?
I don't know. I don't think so. Maybe he has actually. Maybe he has been on like Talking in Stations like years ago or so. But that's basically it, right? But
he should really go on.
A Killah Bee can make it happen, right?
I can probably make it happen, yeah.
Yeah.
You just have to be annoying about it to him until he says yes, and then he'll be.
You know what?
We need to guilt trip him until.
But he's a very whenever he goes on shows like TAS, I think he was on TAS after, or on some show after either X47 or UALX, some big Titan fight, and he's a very level-headed guy when it comes to that kind of stuff. Like some people invite him to shows because they hope for some giant smack talk between him and some goon guy, but he doesn't do that, right? Like. After I remember after I think it was when goons deployed down to purge Tribute and Veil of the Silent, when they deployed with their 1,000 Titans or whatever, he actually had a convo with the Mittani, like an actual PM between the two, and he just said, "Hey, look, the amount of Titans you guys bunched together, being in Delph and mining and doing all that stuff, that's pretty impressive. Never seen something like that." It was a very friendly sort of, he just paid his respects. But obviously his life's goal is in EVE at least to eliminate goons, right? But you can still have a level-headed conversation. It's the Spurgs and local that don't seem to get it.
Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
The accomplishments that people have made while still like not necessarily accepting their position in the game. I don't know how else to put it.
Well, there's like a respectful rivalry, right? That's what I would call it probably. Like after years, like you can't not respect each other, I guess, right? You can't get around that to a degree, right? You would some people would admit it openly and some wouldn't, but in general, like there has to be a certain level of respect, I guess.
They've been fighting each other for so long, and they've been on opposite sides of the EVE universe for so long that you just kind of whatever at that point.
Yeah, and I was actually
as like a pilot. Or as like an FC, because nobody knows the work that FCs put in, or big block FCs more than other block FCs.
So Killah, are you actually like active now? Because sometimes like I see like you feel like you want to play EVE and then you spam like 1,000 pings because like I am Killah Bee, I am playing EVE. log in, right? And then, but it's very
I
rare.
haven't actually. No, I haven't. No, I don't ping. I haven't pinged in like ages. I did one fleet right before the big M2 2.0 showdown, Omega Low, which where basically I just took a bunch of subcaps to clear the regional gate from 4-0 to 49U so we can get some reinforcements through. And I was like, the only reason I did that was because Nidus was still like at the grocery store or something, getting ready for the all-nighter that he knew he was going to have to pull, which he ended up not having to pull. But anyways, and I was like, look, we need to get these reinforcements through so we can replace these Titans that we lost, 2 days prior. So I just say, look, there's nobody else around, so I just take the fleet. I didn't really want to play. I didn't have the time to commit the entire night to the fight, so I wasn't planning to showing up. But I figured, okay, this is not going to take longer than like 2 or 3 hours, so I'm just going to go and get it done. And before that, I haven't done a fleet in a long time. I think the last fleet before that I was involved was one of the Keepstar timers, like FWST or some, like one of the 8 Keepstars or whatever, how many it was that we fought
I don't
over.
even know.
and then before that it was Fountain. I was turbo active at the start of the war from like the 4th of July to the end of Fountain. Basically the first 4 weeks of the war I was really, really active. I did a majority of the fleets in NC dot, and I was active in coordination and everything. But then once Fountain was kind of wrapped up and we only had a couple of Keepstars left to kill, I didn't really want to keep going. I just kind of figured, maybe if it draws me back in at some later point in time, then I'll be back. But at the moment, it hasn't drawn me back in.
Why?
I don't know.
Are you doing is there other stuff that you're doing in life?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So the last like couple of months, I was really busy in real life, but I still have a lot of time to play computer games. Like I work, 9-10 hours a day or whatever. And then I sleep like 6.5. That still leaves like 6 hours, 5 hours or whatever to play. I could easily do a fleet a day if I wanted to.
So what are you playing?
Mostly other games, whatever. Like whatever floats my boat. Sometimes I play WoW. Sometimes I play PoE. Right now I play Hellgate London, which is a pretty old ARPG. It's always whatever. But basically, I don't know. I don't want to sound too jaded when I say stuff like I've seen it all, I've done it all. But there's just stuff like the Keepstar brawls and that, if they were kind of exciting to me because it was kind of a feeding on an unrivaled level where we just had a 1 trillion ISK fight every other day basically, and that was kind of cool. Kind of just me grinding it out for 9 hours, 10 hours every other day. I thought it was pretty exciting. But like even the fights like M2. I knew how M2 at least 1.0 was going to go down because these Titan fights in the big kind of thing, they always go down the same way, man. And there's really not that much decision making involved that excites me because all the decisions you make in a fight like that, you make a decision and then like 2 hours later that decision actually comes into effect because of how slow everything is and how the game is being played at that level of tie-dye. And that's really not what I want to do anymore. Like X47 was the last big Titan fight that I was really, really invested in and that I really wanted to win. And it kind of I just don't want to do that anymore. I really want to do subcap fights and, the fast-paced without tie-dye kind of thing. Unfortunately, we're at a stage of the war now where those kind of fights don't happen all that often anymore because most of the time the fights turn out to be, very big slugfest and then there's a lot of tie-dye involved most of the time. So there's just nothing at the moment. There's nothing going on that interests me.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, it's not exciting for me anymore. It's not because I can't do it. I have done it before. It's just not exciting anymore.
It's not fights, what you want to do in Eve.
Yeah. I want to have fast-paced subcap fights.
Yeah.
But apart from like the gameplay maybe not being like the things that you think are super challenging, I think a lot of people are still very emotionally invested in a war because they want to come out on top, right? Like for the sake of their tribe or for the sake of their narrative, or there's loads of reasons why people are still invested in the war, but none of them apply to you. I'm kind of curious.
I'm not.
It just about the gameplay for you?
Not anymore. So I gave up on being invested in the whole anti-goon narrative and being the big, like after the North failed. The North was my big project, right? Like I really wanted the North as a concept to succeed, where all the Northern alliances together but in X47 and around that time, the whole thing just fell apart, and I realized it doesn't work because the advantage of the Imperium, and one of the advantages that the Imperium has right now as well, is that they're one alliance under one leader, with one infrastructure, one big banner sort of thing, right? Trying to keep a scrap of 20 alliances with somewhat aligned interests, but that don't really want to be playing together anyways together, is just such a pain in the ass. And at the end of the day, that's what the North was, and that's what Pappy is right now. It's I can't bond. I want to fight for NC, yes, and I will fight for NC when it comes to this. But we have wonderful FCs running the show at the moment. There's no need for me to be around. It's not like if I don't show up, the thing's gonna fall apart. And then I really don't care about Goons winning or us winning anymore. I really don't. Like, for me, I'm not an anti-Goon sort of narrative kind of guy. My way, like the way I look at myself was always, I'm just a dude that was kind of born into fighting Goons, because when I started, like basically all my EVE career, I was fighting Goons, except that one narrow time when I was in BL and we were kind of siding with the CFC in the Halloween War. But apart from that, and I just fight for my side. I look at myself more like a soldier, more like a general, where I just do what my president, quote unquote, wants me to do, right? I don't really care about the narrative behind it. I'm more like a military kind of guy. I don't have any motivation to kill Goons. There was a time not that long ago I was really, really close to joining Goons. It's not a thing that I cannot make up in my mind. I could easily join Goons right now if I wanted to, and it wouldn't hurt me at all, right?
My corp, Killah.
Yeah.
How do you know they would have you?
Because I have several standing offers to join Goons.
Just kidding.
You're not good enough, Killah. Go away.
Yeah.
They don't want.
So yeah, it's really not that personal for me at all. This war is not personal, so I don't care which side wins. I want NC to succeed. Let me just say this: I want NC to succeed, but I think that NC will succeed even if we lose the war without a problem.
So before we went live, we talked about something similar, right? And like, I think we're all three in a similar kind of position there. I think Mr. V doesn't care too much about like grudges and all that stuff anymore. Like, I know I don't, right? And then you don't, and we are all three not super involved on the like highest level at the moment, right? Because that's the like where you have to really know like this war, right? And
I really wish that were true.
So like
it's like there's like a difference between like the intention and then what actually happens. Because like I came back as the intention to just be like, Eve actually graphics-wise looks pretty cool, so I'm gonna go be a line member with maximum graphics and join the Black Ops camp and shoot shit with my Marshall. If you look at my year in review video thing, my most used chip in 2020 or whatever was actually the Marshall, because it was just an insta-locking Marshall sitting on a Black Ops camp shooting dudes, right? I kept that up for like a couple of weeks, and then I just see like these fleets going wrong, and I'm like, I can't, like, I physically hurt seeing my people suffer, so I need to try the FC again. And then, like, the current meta is so far out of my comfort zone with my warp driving hacks everywhere, and like, I like brawling.
Yeah,
and not fighting around with Serbs, and I'm like, this is so far out of my comfort zone. So I was feeding fleets left and right, being absolutely horrible. But still, like, when you come back and you have this kind of like reputation, people still ask you questions like, hey, we have this fight coming up, what should we do? And then they're asking me questions, and I'm so far out of my depth and so far out of my comfort zone. And I'm just like, I don't know what to do. So I kind of found my comfort zone there now, which is where I can just spam a shitload of pings with a lot of capital letters, because people are apparently willing to log in for me, which is awesome. And then on command chat, I'm like, okay, people, clever FCs, tell me what the hell to do, because I have no clue. Especially in the Fuzzy Solve contest, it's like, okay, I formed 1,000 dudes. Asher, it's yours now.
Mm-hmm.
So there is this, exactly. So there is this like, I mean, I feel like I'm pretty emotionally invested in the war after having 3 weeks of holiday in a lockdown, and I just played EVE all day, every day. So I would like my people to win, because it's like a tribe, right? I've met a lot of people from the leadership in real life. Like, a lot of them are my friends. So I would like us obviously to win and to succeed. So if I can help somewhere, I would do it.
Yeah, like I wasn't saying like any of us don't care who wins, right? That's a different story. Like we kind of invested in the war since we're like all active. Like obviously I want our side to win too, right? But like the whole like old school grudge kind of thing, like you want whatever, you want NC Dot to be destroyed, right? It doesn't really, that's not really a thing
No,
anymore.
those edges are gone. Like I think it's nowadays, like back in the days, like it would have been cool to fight back to the point where NC Dot would completely disband, and now you're like you just want to
At least
win
there's
and
someone to
actually
shoot,
not
right?
NC Dot to disband, because like what would Eve be without NC Dot and Vince Draken, right? It would be kind of dull.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah,
mean,
that's totally true. Yeah.
people always made fun of, or not like everyone, but I guess half of Eve made fun of Asher's post when he made like this Reddit post about like why goons are actually the good guys. And I can totally see his point, right? His point being like, how can a group or a person like Mittens be bad for the game if so many people want to mobilize and come kill the group or like his shit, right? So, you know, and
He creates content just by people hating him.
I mean, he kind of does, right? He kind. I mean, you have to admit that. So,
I mean, war started pretty much.
yeah, and I think this narrative it kind of holds up, to be quite honest, right? You need people to shoot each other. Like, why would you go and say like you want people removed from the game, basically, right? I think that's always going to end bad at the end for everyone, right? So, I think if you have played a long time or like at least have seen it a long time, you realize like you need some targets too, right? Like where are you gonna go? Like who are you gonna shoot if they're gone? So yeah.
Yeah, I didn't when he posted that, a lot of people in our chats, they were like going completely ham and they were like, look at this delusional guy and blah blah blah. And I said, look, obviously some of the stuff he wrote was a bit spinny and a bit Kool-Aidy, but at the end of the day, as you said, the point of the post, I get that point. Just the way he wrote it, I thought was because instead of just saying what you just said, he did basically what he did was, we're not the bad guys, it's actually you. And that's, that
Which is
doesn't really help.
exactly what anybody would say about their own side.
Yeah, right. Like, and instead of pointing out, look, he could have also said, look, I understand where you guys come from. You've been fighting us for so long and you see it, but he could have just expressed his point of view and then be done with that. And everybody still trolling him for that would just be an idiot. But instead, what he did was like, look, we're not the bad guys. It's actually most of you guys who are the, and that always just turns into a shit show if you do that. So
Yeah,
it was a
But
bit
that's
weird.
but that's
I
kind
agree.
of the point, right? That's kind of the point to you have a point, but then you sprinkle some narrative on top just to get the blood flowing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if that was the point, that's fine. That worked. It definitely worked. But I don't know. Because he wasn't happy with the result. Like he was he didn't really get the, I don't want to call it feedback, but the response that he got on Reddit, right? So I'm not sure.
But I don't think anyone's point on Reddit is ever to have like a professional civil discussion.
Nobody looks for like a positive response from Reddit. Let's be honest.
Progott does for sure. A lot of times. Progott sometimes writes big posts where he's like, why are these people all calling me a retard? This is so confusing. And
Okay,
like,
so I should say it's not that nobody expects a good response. It's just that you're not going to get one regardless.
Yeah,
of what you
exactly. It doesn't matter what you expect. Reddit will always be Reddit. You will get what Reddit gets you.
But also, you think that people are able to separate the persona from the character, right? Like, for example,
yeah.
I mean, the Mithani is a very, very carefully crafted space persona. But if you think that he's going to walk into a store and order a sandwich the way he talks in the State of the Union, then you're pretty freaking delusional.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing. That's like what I try to get across to a lot of people. Like, 'cause there's also a lot of people in our FC team hate Aerith, for example, or hated him when he was active, like down to the bone. They really like, this guy's such a jerk. Wow, like all the words, right? And I met Aerith. I've worked with him during the CSM, and I can tell everybody that Aerith's a nice guy. Yeah, he did a little bit of banter here and there, but that was fun, and he certainly has a huge ego. when it comes to what he does, but he's really good at what he does, right? So I think he deserves that as well. So apart from that, he was a nice guy. And I told him, look, whenever he's on a meta show or whenever he's on, Fireside Chat and he talks, what he's doing is he's being the character Aerith. He's not actually that kind of guy in real life. And it's the same for Mitani. And people don't seem to get that. People don't want to hear that. Like we have these diehard Bob guys or anti-Goon guys in NC, obviously, because that's where they go to, right? And you
But
can't really with them.
But I think, like, not to go like super meta psychology here, but I think like people going like latching onto somebody's space persona is kind of their own kind of space persona, right? Because if you look at Eve meetups and FanFest and Evesterdam and stuff, like everybody is super chill. Nobody is gonna be like, oh, you're this space persona that I dislike. I'm gonna go and get.
I mean, like, probably not the norm, but I actually know someone that like got in a bar fight because of things that happened in game. So it's not like
actually?
100. There's always the outliers. So, but
Right.
I've also never been to Eve meet. So
Well,
Yeah,
Rip
see,
It's not like when Killah and I met at Evesterdam, we were rolling on the street fighting each other or anything, right?
yeah.
I mean, I
Well,
may have been rolling on the street, but it wasn't because I was fighting you. It had,
That was a good
it had
Evesterdam, though. I enjoyed
different
that.
reasons. Yeah, it was a good one.
When
No,
when
I
I was
agree.
like when Pando told me that you were coming on the show, I was like, oh, Killah. Oh yeah, he was pretty cool. I met him at Evesterdam. Oh, Evesterdam, like a social gathering of people. Like, God, I crave that so much right
What
now.
is that?
Yeah.
yeah, I wonder when the next FanFest or Easterdam or whatever is gonna take place. Like, I mean, we're kind of hoping for 2022, right?
People keep saying
Yeah.
that Eve Vegas is still gonna happen since it's not CCP ran, but more just a gathering of people. But we'll see.
Oof.
I don't know.
Oh.
I mean, I'll go for it, I guess, but let's not get into that. That just seems fucking stupid in many ways, but okay.
Yeah,
That's fine.
I mean, the thing is, like, I'm not gonna tell anyone to go or not to go or whatever, right? But I mean, the situation right now, it would be a little bit. I think it's a little bit dumb, but
Yeah.
whatever. It's
Well,
not.
again, it's a very dangerous topic to get into because you're just gonna have people like,
There's too many heated opinions on both sides.
Yep, exactly.
It is what it
That
is.
was
I
not
do
my-
remember. I do remember though, right before like all the shutdowns over here, we had Fulcrum on, and he said like he was actually in a town like or in a city close to Wuhan, and he's like, yeah, everything is shut down and stuff like this. Like you can't get in and out, and everyone was like, what the fuck? And he's like, oh yeah, it's coming to you guys too. You're gonna have lockdowns, and I'm like, no way, right? And boom,
Yeah.
like, Yeah.
Yeah, we were so freaking naive here. I did a project for a client in Hong Kong, and they had, of course, the experience in the past. So, like, when there was any kind of like chance that something would happen, like borders closed, masks on, everything, and they were just looking at us being cuddled up together in a meeting room, no mask or anything, and they were just like, dudes, what are you doing? Like, it's gonna come over there. And you're like, no, it's fine. Like, why would it ever come?
yeah. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it is what it is.
Yeah, at least we got EVE Online to occupy our minds.
That's for sure. I honestly don't know like how I would have stayed sane without EVE Online during this whole thing.
Like gaming in general, right? That must have been like a solid like social like I don't want to say
Saving
exactly. Like I was about to say replacement, like it's not the right word for it, but you know what I mean,
I think
right?
it's a replacement for a lot of us, regardless of the social situations that we're in with the
I mean,
virus.
that's the reason why one of the reasons that I came back to EVE was the summer was alright because you could still go outside and you could go. The weather was nice, so you could still do stuff and see people outside at a distance. But then when it got darker and darker and darker, then like and colder, like what do you do? So that's when you fire up EVE Online and just content on the doorstep.
Yeah. You know, we do what we can, right? And I hope everyone's getting through this all right. It looks like
So Panda,
so.
I was curious, Panda, did you ever like take a long break from Eve, or have you been active all the time? I'm not sure if you
He
you have
doesn't
that
know how to
much
take
overlap?
long breaks. He says that he's going to take a long break, and then it's like 3 days, and he's like, okay.
That's
Okay.
kind of true. Well, I did take a super small break, which Miranda's just making fun of, like recently, like not too long ago. That's but you know, I left all the core channels and all that stuff because it was just like getting too much, right? And it was just like constantly like, and so I took a break, and after a couple of days, I realized, okay, if I leave all these channels, you know, it's manageable. Like, I don't have to be like 24/7, like turned on to like fucking what's happening here and what's happening there, and like all these fleets. It's just like I went to a point where I couldn't even do anything. It was just so much going on all the time, and that's probably like I'm just not designed for that. I think I'm just not designed to do like 500 things at once, like 3 things at once. Okay, and that's fine. But like, it was just too much. So like, I took a super short break, but I did take a long break when I had the military service, like in I don't even know when, years ago. So I had to
So
take
you
a
left
year
all
off.
the channels, so to kind of, so you left all the channels, so you don't like. I know what you mean, right? You're in 100,000 channels, and every time there's like an unread message in your ping relay or in the allied channel, you're like, I kind of want to know what's going on.
Yeah,
And then your
the
whole
ping relays
evening
are
is
still
just like
going.
He literally just didn't log into Discord because that's the only way to keep it. Because even when, you know, even when he leaves all these channels, then people just start DMing him instead and talking to him about shit. So
That's
it's
true.
just no way for him
But
to
I mean,
get away from it.
yeah, I don't have to
it can
tell
get
you
very
guys, right?
overloading.
Yeah.
And then he starts feeling guilty because then he feels like all these people are depending on him, and he's letting them all down by just like walking away, even though it's like completely mentally acceptable to take a break from running things and being in charge of things every once in a while.
Have you
Yeah.
settled on the rhythm now where you're not involved in everything and it's okay?
Yeah,
Or do you
like,
still
yeah, like, and like when we're talking about this, like, it's not like it wasn't as crazy as people might just think right now, right? Like they think like, oh, there was some mental breakdown or some shit. Like, no, like I've been close to like burnout a couple times, right? And you just have to realize it quick enough and say, like, okay, now we have to like slow down, right? But in a war like this, it's very hard to do that. Like, it's very hard to just do one fleet every like once a week or something, right? It's you know,
Yeah.
you're either in or you're out. So it's like, what are you doing? What are you doing, right? And it's what I actually wanted to talk to you guys about too, because I talked to Progon like 2 weeks ago, I think, and we talked about like how like decisions and stuff are made, right? But if you're not involved like a whole lot, like me and Killah, then like you're still in the channel, you see the decision being made. And even if you have an idea, for example, Killah says whatever, don't light the sino and jump those tines in or whatever, right? Like you're not gonna step up there and inject yourself instantly into this decision-making process, right? And I thought it was quite interesting because we're like kind of in the same situation there, right? You see what's going on, you put some input in there, right? And for those like who are wondering, that never see these channels, like how this is all coming together, I think it's just interesting maybe to talk about, right?
I think the first M2 fight was a really interesting snowball of events actually, because I think that one everyone on both sides can say that was a good fight where the server held up surprisingly well. But I like how it started because when this started, it was still. So I took 3 weeks off during the before Christmas, leading up to the New Year, and at that time there was loads of stuff timed to Australian time zone, which is around downtime for me. So I was like, that's perfect, right? You play a little bit of Eve early on in the day, and then you chill out in the evening, and you at least try to break away from it. And then the second time my holiday started, everything got retimed to US time zone. So I was like, okay, well that sucks. But then at some point the jammer started coming online, and in M2 I was like, I kind of feel like playing Eve Online, but I don't want to do blob warfare or anything. So I suggested to one of the coordinators in the FC channel, like, hey, let's go shoot the M2 jammer and see what happens. Like, can somebody else form a small fleet first? Somebody who's not super well known. So if a person who's not super well known does a ping, then usually it attracts less, a less big hostile fleet. So it's still a bit smaller scale. So this one guy was like, yeah, that's cool. I'll form some bombers and start shooting a jammer. So he goes there, Havish, he starts shooting the jammer, and then the first hostile response is like some jackdaws. So okay, hostiles form some small jackdaws, and we form, another FC forms a jackdaw fleet to counter that. And then so it slowly starts escalating, and then at some point the hostiles are like, oh shit, this is actually, we're gonna lose the jammer if we don't form seriously. So we're forming Munins, and then I form a Munin fleet as well. So you keep like every time you do one step extra and you keep escalating. And at some point everyone's kind of exhausted what numbers they're going to get from the pings, and the fights clashed, and we had a pretty sick brawl. I think it was like 50-50 efficiency, everyone at 0 brawl, everyone lost their lodges and disengaged. And then I didn't understand why, but the hostiles, for us anyway, the hostiles decided to leave and concede the jammers to us. And I actually never understood why the decision was made, because the numbers were equal and like they could have escalated with caps at that point. So I was like, I don't know why. But they decided to all leave and let us have control over the jammers. So we kill all the jammers or reinforce them, and then we all high five each other and we're like, all right, the Euro's job is done. Asher, it's yours now. Let's go. And things just kind of escalated from there. So the jammer was still down when the Keepstar came out, and we're like, well, I mean, if the jammer's down, we may as well jump stuff in and see what numbers we get. And then that kept happening on both sides for what felt like hours. Just keep jumping more in, keep jumping more in, keep jumping more in. And then we realized that we were actually equal on Titan numbers. And we're like, I mean, we're on a friendly Keepstar. We have equal Titan numbers. Why the fuck not? And that's when we started planning the first Doomsday volley, and it kind of escalated there. But I like that it all started with a skirmish commander forming a handful of bombers, and it just, butterfly effects into what ends up being, the world record breaking fight.
Yeah, that's a lot of times what happens, right? Like, it just, you can't predict this kind of stuff. And I remember there was 2 Keepstars, right? What was the other one next door? Or was it a key? Yeah, it was a Keepstar timer before that, right? And but that thing was getting done, and then the second Keepstar was coming up, and I was actually in a couple like special, like I had a little bit of a special squad for like a little play that we wanted to do, like that Asher and I were talking about for ages to do, right? We wanted to do this so badly. And I'm sure you probably know what it is, but
yeah, I know.
And I was ready to go, but like I was so tired because on that day actually I was driving home for like 7 hours straight, and I just came through the door, ate something, sat down, and then this fight was kicking off, right? And then this in M2, then I remember sitting there and thinking, we jumped our Titans in first and all that stuff, and I felt like the cards are on the table basically, right? And we're kind of like giving the position to hostiles because they can decide where they want to jump in range, not in range, and all that stuff. So for me, it all looked like nothing's gonna happen here, right? And I personally, like, I stood my guys down because the play wasn't happening anyway, and I was in the wrong ship and all that stuff. So I told my guys actually, like, guys, have those thingies ready, and said didn't happen, but like next time, right? And I hate this. That's the worst at FCing, right? If you stand your guys down but nothing happened. And I had that today actually. I had like a fucking awesome fleet and wanted to do like super awesome shit, and I had to stand them down with nothing happening, right?
Yeah, that's the worst.
Yeah, it is the worst. It really is. But yeah, I remember that just escalating kind of out of nowhere, really, right? It was kind of weird.
Yeah, because indeed you remember there was because there was a 3 Keepstars all at once, and the first one, for some reason, also hostiles were really unprepared. They were still like jumping, like assembling subcaps and stuff. And yeah, the first one was saved, and Asher and me actually jumped in our fleets first, and we started fighting on some on the Sinojammer, I think, and it caused tie-dye. And while the tie-dye was running, the Keepstar already repaired. So we're like, all right, we saved one. Like, we expected to lose all of them, so saving one is already kind of a victory.
Yeah.
Let's just jump all the dudes over to M2 and we'll take it play by play there.
Yeah.
That was crazy. But I'm never staying up until downtime again, though, throughout the whole night.
And that's what you say now, but in half a year, this massive fight's kicking off. All your bros are like, V, we need you. You're gonna stay
No, but
up, right?
But even in BR5, like in BR5, I was much more active. Like in BR5, there was a stretch of a couple of hours where I think I was calling targets for the Titans, and at 4 a.m. in the night, I was like, I'm out of gas. Like I just closed all my clients. Titans on grid didn't matter. Just you check in the morning if they're still alive or not.
Yeah, I actually had a fleet in BTEC R2, and I stood the guys down like, I don't know, 3 hours in or so. Because again, it was like a special play we wanted to do, and it didn't work because the server didn't hold up, right? We wanted to actually void bomb the entire fucking cap fleet with like 50 void bombers rotating in, keep void bombing, right? Because if all those Archons are dry, like who's gonna rep those Titans, right? But then we realized everyone had 100% cap all the time, non-stop. Nobody was getting actually.
Yeah, that happened. That's so
frustrating. And I was like, guys, you're in bombers, just haul on these Titans. I don't give a shit. And I just locked off, right? I was so disappointing. I had so big plans, and I was so hyped about it. But yeah, didn't happen.
But you always like I don't know you that well, but you always have like these plans and these plays.
Yeah,
and
that's the shit I love, right?
What is like the most like disgusting trick that you ever pulled in Eve, or the one that you're like the most proud of that it actually worked out?
Ghost bombs.
What did you say?
That's my favorite. Your favorite trick, like your favorite sneaky stuff that you've done.
No, which one? Because your mic was breaking up.
I just said ghost bombs are my favorite.
Well, ghost bomb is kind of similar to pipe bomb, right? So I don't want to clip.
But it's sneaky, like it's got the extra sneakiness to it.
That is true. So ghost bomb, I mean, it's way harder to pull off than pipe bombs, right? So pipe bombs everyone is familiar with, right? You have a hostile fleet, you bank on them warping to a specific gate at a specific time, basically. Then you throw a bubble, and you know exactly where they land, and it's exactly where your Scion is going to land. You bridge in smart bomb battleships, and you smart bomb everyone to shit, right? Now, ghost bombs are the same concept. You kind of predict where they're going to land, but you have your ships already locked off, so you don't have to bridge in and all that stuff, right? And it's specifically on drifter wormholes that works quite well, because you can really like easily predict where they're going to land. And it comes out of nowhere. You can do it on all kinds of space. But the hard part is the preparation, right? You need to get those ships in place and enough of them. And that stuff. But yeah, I would think the most hated concept though was either Bush Ravens or like Snatch or Stukas, right? So
they were all of those were like bushing around the grid, right?
Yes, and I would say like the first one that was Snatch, like that was like I think in hindsight, FC skill wise, I'm the most proud of, because like now I don't even know how we pulled this off. Like it's so fucking hard to pull off. Because Snatch, so Snatch is like just a ton of mages, but they're all MWD fit, right? So you bank on like capitalizing on chaos basically, and because you're MWD fit, you would anchor up when you want to boosh without MWD, so you're all in range to each other, right? But that means you can only move with MJDs then, right? So, and then you have to maneuver around. And that's why I actually fought Killah B like at least a few times. I'm not sure if we got away with a lot of kills against him, but it was always good fun. Right? But I don't know how we pulled this off a lot of times, to be honest. I think we got lucky and nobody knew how to like counter it. That's the only reason why it worked, actually.
Sometimes it just works because it's new, right? And people just don't know what happened.
Yeah, and you know what? Why I think one big reason why I like the weird shits is also people enjoy doing like different stuff, you know? They want to be like the first guys to do this and this, right? Like, I don't know. Be it chemos, right? That's a nasty trick too that like I also invented, right? And now everyone's using that.
Oh, you are the
Yeah,
You were the
yeah.
inventor of those.
Yeah, and you know what's
Oh,
you know what's
man.
you know what's the saddest part? We had that trick ready for so long, right? But I never used it because it was the counter to snatch. Like if we used chemos, Killah B would have seen that, right? And he would have said, like, wait a second, we can just fucking chemo these guys, and snatch would have been
Oh,
dead
shit.
right there. So and everyone was
really
always
cool.
complaining about Snatch too. Like, there's no counter to this. I'm like, there is actually a counter, right? But I couldn't say it, right? It's funny.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was also really enjoyable coming back with some of the old tricks that people used to use way back. I guess they gone out of fashion or something, so they work again. Like, because the current FCs weren't aware of it or something, and so you could pull
Yeah.
it off. So I don't know if you're listening, but Mist Amatin, the guy who always runs Corms, every single day he ran Cormorant Fleet. And that's kind of dangerous because if you do the same thing every day, you become predictable, right? But at the end of the day, it's just Corm, so anyway, who cares if you lose a bunch? But so at first, I just started like sniping him with like 4 oracles or some stuff. Like he jumped in and we just warped at range and sniped the Cormorants, and then he would warp on top of us. And then I had a safe spot pretty close to the gate, and then he kept probing the safe spot, and he kept warping to the oracles at 0 without having eyes on our safe spot. So at one point, it's like, okay, dude, if you're gonna do this every time, then you need to get dragged. So we put up a drag bubble in the safe spot, and then we warp there as bait, and then the drag bubble is there with the smart bombing rogues and stuff. And then when he landed on Gritty, I was like, fuck, we got done. So that was trap 1. And then trap 2 was that we refitted our oracles rather than having lasers on them. We just had like smart bombs fitted instead. So we just pretended to be snipers waiting for him to warp at 0. And then for the longest of times he wouldn't warp, so I thought he was on to us. And then I was like, fuck, this is never gonna warp. We're gonna warp one more time and then we'll just whatever dock up. And then he does warp at 0. And then the trap is sprung and he was like, fuck, on again.
Yeah. You know what?
So that stuff is just
I like so there's another like sneaky trick that I did with like smart bomb battleships that's very similar actually, right? We call it transformers. So we went with like Macarials or Typhoons. Like a doctrine you want to be on 0. Arty Macarials, yeah, you're gonna warp on 0 and engage these guys. So like, what you do is like you warp onto hostiles or onto the grid, like bait them out a little bit, right? Be all juicy and stuff. And you just hit them with your arties or your cruise missiles, right? And then you align out to the sun. But you have to be like, you better be aligned, right? I always say that in Fleet, like, don't be that one guy who's not aligned, right? And then the second they warp on top of you, you just warp out to the sun, right? So the sun happens to be bubbled, and you happen to have Nestors in Fleet. So what you do is in warp, you refit the smart bombs, right? Suddenly when you land, you're not artifit anymore. Now you're smart bomb battleships, right? And they all follow you.
Do that in warp.
You can do that in warp. Like they changed a little bit because now you cannot do it with a weapons timer anymore. You used to do that with a weapons timer, even. But you can still do that in warp, right? Because at the end, as you know, there's little warp ball forms, right? Like the 2.5 cam, and everyone's going to be in range to an Esther, and it's not a hard thing to refit. So yeah, we caught a couple of people like that, right? But
That's
it's like
filthy as well.
It
You
is.
can be so creative and Eve with screwing people over. Like that's what's really fun about it.
That is the best part, right? Isn't it? To be honest.
There's also a cool trick, and I guess it's going to be used against us now, but it's not necessarily complicated. But it's like the meta of probing Hecates that just warp the stuff at 0 all the time. And then every time that you crash or something or you log off and you're still like in probe range, like these dudes are going to warp to you and kill you when you're logged off.
Yeah.
But it's very easy to fake it as well. So you log off one client and then you probe yourself with another. So you make some safe spots that are exactly on the log off spots, except that you can just go there while you're not actually logged off. So you just put like an Inti or a Covops in there uncloaked, pretending to be logged off, and there's always dudes warping to you at 0 and like, free kill. Except it's not, because you have like a small bomber crew there.
I actually wanted to do like a play like that in one of the big fights, where you just have so what I talked about earlier was or what Miranda brought up was the ghost bomb, right? Now, if you know where the big fight's gonna be, Like, why not just like a day before? You just log a client off 1,000,000 km. All right, bookmark that spot. Then bookmark 20 km behind that spot, obviously, where the bubble would be, right? And then you just log off a shit ton of smart bomb battleships there. And then suddenly there is a dread, or there is something, right? Something juicy enough. You don't have to sacrifice a Titan necessarily, right? But something, seems to be like 1,000,000 km away. And everyone who has ever probed in a big fight like that, that's your indication, like, oh, someone had a disconnect. Like, let's check it out, right? But then there happens to be a bubble, preferably a horde bubble if you're like, must be like, for the dude finding out, should be a friendly bubble so he's not too, like, suspicious. And then he's going to report, oh, he has a dread. And if that subcap fleet doesn't have anything better to do, they're totally going to warp there, right? And then boom, you can just log in and think. But logging in a big fight like that, I don't know. Like, depends on the size of the fight. So I never did it. I never did it.
That's really a 1 in 100, I think, chance to pull it off. But when you get it, like, it used to be much easier. Like way back when you could easily replicate deep saves, so you can make like 1,000 AU deep saves. And back before Tether and Citadels and shit, you
1,000 AU.
Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy.
There used to be this thing where if you jump to a Sino that is no longer there, you would end up in the same geographical location as the system you came from. So if you had a very deep save to begin with, which I don't remember how the original one was ever made, but some people had it.
Oh, you could go further and further and
anywhere.
Further.
Yeah, so you could replicate it anywhere. So then once we had these deep saves, you could put the deep save 1,000 AU away, and you would light a Sino there with a drag bubble, and that's how you would jump in a base capital or even your entire capital fleet, and then anyone warping there from anywhere in the solar system would get dragged wherever you wanted them to. So it was actually fairly safe way to Sino in. But that got fixed, unfortunately, because it was very abusive.
There's a couple, like, I like it when, for example, like a smallest example is the warp to gate on zero trick that we talked about. I think with ProGod I talked about it too. But where I was like, why has nobody ever used this? Like, we know it, like, a bubble drags 500 km. Why don't you just make a spot behind the gate, 510, throw a bubble behind the gate? That bubble will always drag you on zero. And there can be like a shit ton of bubbles in front of it. It doesn't care, right?
Doesn't matter.
So like I came up with that and was like, why don't nobody ever used it, right? I've never seen it. And it was just that was
also your invention?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna claim it right now because I've never seen it before, but like technically. But it's one of those things where it's like, if you wait for the right moment to ever use it, it's gonna be like in 2 years. And I had that with chemos, right? We had those ready for like years. We never used them because we didn't have to. But I really wanted to use it, right? So we started using it in D4, not in D4, in TCAG, what's it called again? G-Magic, right? To get out of out of ESO, because we would otherwise get stuck there. So yeah, like that, I love those little like nasty tricks, or like less nasty, like just getting out. They could follow us through the gates there.
Now it's like inventing your house with all kinds of drawings on some next level traps and stuff. Because you already theory crafted the counter to your own fleet. Like, that's pretty next level, I think. And you're just sitting on that until you need it.
Well, that was an accident, right?
20 things to counter his own fleets.
It was an accident.
Said it again, Miranda. Like, I think whenever I'm talking, or whenever someone's talking, your mic breaks up.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Or when the mic is activated. I don't know how to fix that.
Sorry.
But yeah. All right. Let's see what else I've got on a list as topics, huh? Like one question here that I wrote down was actually like, how different is this war to like the bigger wars in the past? I'm pretty sure like the principles are still the same, right? Like it still works the same. Like, people are still in a channel throwing around ideas, and what could we do, and then it's decided, and you go in a certain direction. And as you just said, like fights still escalate like they used to, right? One fleet starts the
I
other.
feel like it's quite different, actually. For me personally, it feels very different, but I missed a bunch of stuff in the middle, obviously. But I think two key things are different. Is that one, obviously, one major advantage is that I'm still in the mindset that if I ping my heart out, I'm going to outnumber the enemy. That's still my mindset, but clearly that's not the case in this war, and that's why we have these like Serbs and all these fleet concepts that people have been fighting outnumbered for so long that is like they're always expecting to be outnumbered, and I still have to get used to that because it's a bit like we always used to outnumber everybody, and so that's quite new actually. That's why, yeah, for example, yesterday the fight didn't really go in our favor because I was like, I mean, come on, we spam like 100 pings, we should be at least equal numbers here. Let's go. And then still we got outnumbered by like 300 dudes or something, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be bad.
We were
But I think
actually
the second thing is, sorry.
I was just saying we were actually sitting on comms and we're like, wait a second, goons are in the middle of a big fight. Why didn't they like poke us? Like we could have formed two. Like it was like, well, then they're probably about to disengage, and the fight kept going on. We're like, should we form? Like I don't know. Like should we?
Yeah,
like
yeah,
I wasn't in the core
yeah.
channels, right? And then Shines was like, well, I'm sure they're gonna be fine. And then at some point it was like, yeah, goons were holding the grid, but it was kind of bloody or whatever, right? I think that was the end of the story, right?
Yeah, the thing was that the thing was that like that's also a thing that kind of escalated from something small, and that's something that I still had to get used to. But I thought that we were pinging so furiously for reinforcement that we would get that we would keep somewhat equal numbers, because the fight started with 500 on our side versus 600 on the other side, and that was quite manageable. So like, all right, sure, worst case we can extract. But then during the course of the fight, the other side reinforced so many, like up to 350 people more than us, which meant that they could have tackle fleets that cram everyone down, right? That's where you can't extract very cleanly anymore. So that's when you lose a fight, it like really skews in your disadvantage. So in hindsight, yeah, I should have called you for sure. So note for next time.
Well, I mean,
but
we're doing our own thing to a degree, like all the time. So you might like maybe you think we were busy or whatever, but I think we just returned from a fleet. That's why we are actually sitting with a bunch of FCs in one channel. So maybe that's why nobody poked us. I don't know.
Yeah, hindsight. But I think the other thing that's very noticeable, and I got to give some credit there to because like Killah said, it's a coalition of like a huge coalition of lots of different alliances, but the coordination between the FCs is pretty good, I think. Like for example, now there's this strategy to do flash forms to go hacking stuff, but you will see like the pings from all the different alliances go out at exactly the same second, right? Like they all like, okay, we're all gonna ping now. This is our target. And when they warp into a fight, everyone's gonna come into the same warp in point. And it sounds pretty basic and like no brainer, but I remember way back what gave us a huge edge was that we had somebody like FCing the FC, so all the fleets would be shooting the same alliance, which was easy because it was always, NC Dot or Raiden or PL, whatever. And you would just, everyone would focus on one alliance until they didn't have enough DPS to break your reps anymore, and you would move on to the next one. Whereas on their side, there would occasionally be an alliance warping in by themselves, they're like, we're going in, please follow us. And that's the kind of stuff that used to happen back then on every side. But nowadays, like nothing really happens without all the FCs being completely in line and coordinated and making exactly the same move. So I think everyone has gotten a lot better on that part, like a lot better than they used to. So I would say on both sides we're fairly equal on that now. And I thought in the past we had an edge on that. So that's a big difference, I think.
Yeah. So there was a question in chat actually, and it was for Killah B, like pretty simple. What kind of fleets? Because you talked about, I think that's where this question came from. Because you talked about like the tie-dye being like the demotivating factor there for you two FCs. So what kind of fleets are your favorite to run if there was no tie-dye, right?
No, tie-dye isn't necessarily demotivating for me. I'm fine to handle. Like I don't mind tie-dye. I even don't mind 10% tie-dye. I've had plenty of fights of 10% tie-dye where afterwards I thought that was an amazing fight. It's when it gets worse than tie-dye, right? That's what annoys me. And especially at the current stage of the war where it's all about either absolutely dominating your opponent or just not fighting at all, or technically. That's what it's about. Obviously, fights like yesterday proved me wrong in the sense that there is still fights where both sides can, get home and say, look, we've done the best we've could here and we've had an amazing time. But yeah, generally speaking, what I like the most is kind of like one fleet versus one fleet, which is why I enjoyed Fountain so much, which is why I was really active at the start of the war when it was basically PanFam versus Init, and most of the time, for example,
Totally fair. Like one versus one.
Yeah, exactly. 1v1, one coalition versus
Good
one
fights
alliance.
everywhere.
But it was like a lot of the fights in Fountain started fairly even. Like when we engaged on that 40s, it was basically just my fleet warping down on your fleet and that kind of stuff. And then going from there is what's enjoyable to me. I don't know. Like the first M2 sounds like the way it developed, it could have been fun for me as well because it developed very organically. But everything about the second M2, like even before the crash even happened and all that, everything about the second M2 was just cancer to me, because the whole planning and everything involved in a fight like that, which is why I was against the fight, which is why I was against us jumping in the first place. Like you plan with all these factors, you like even the premise that the servers work in a fight like that is such a bad premise to have. Obviously, you kind of have to have it because otherwise, why even play, right? If you just assume the server's going to crash, why even bother playing in the first place? But on a scale like that, I thought it was just such a weird plan for us to have, to be like, look, we're just going to jump in on this spot after Goon's already sitting there with 5,000 people and 600 Titans loaded. And they were counting.
But Killah, do you not like the anticipation, like the lead up to that? Because that I think is like before even anyone jumps in, I think that part is awesome, because like when something that big is happening, every single clever person who is invested or even not invested is going to be there. So you're going to have that's a rare opportunity. You have like your full A team on deck preparing for it.
Yeah, but I wasn't that's the thing. I'm not invested, and I had no kind of tickle to be there at all. I didn't the second M2. It was completely non-existent. I have zero investment in this war at this point. And when the second M2 was happening, I was like, yeah, this is gonna be a big showdown. I was gonna jump in my Titan. I was gonna stay around for the first or second DD volley. I was just gonna log off and go to bed after. I was literally just gonna hit my DD once or twice and then go to bed.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Pizza guy walking into the burning room.
It wasn't that exciting to me. So yeah, I prefer nowadays. I certainly do prefer the subcap fights. Even caps are fine. If both sides drop dreads or caps or carriers, that can be cool. It's just a matter of what level it happens on. What V accounts us with having a good coordination is also something that kind of annoys me now when I want to. If I wanted to take a fleet out right now, right? If I wanted to take out a fleet right now and go shoot some IHUB in Delph or shoot some Jammer or something, I would basically have to go to a coordination channel and be like, look, 40 allies, I'm about to take a fleet here and go here. Make sure you have Sinos in place here. Make sure you have bridge tides, but don't ping yet, because otherwise they're going to form more dudes. And I can't just take out a fleet, and I have to tell 40 people what to do first, and I have to do this and that until I can actually get to. And I just don't want to do that anymore. I don't feel like doing it at the moment, anyways.
Yeah, I feel you. I mean, for M2, for the second fight that was supposed to be the big showdown, I was in a similar situation. I'm not the Titan guy. My Titan was stuck in Fountain anyway. The play I was talking about earlier, we couldn't really make that happen because it has to be a little bit more of a surprise kind of thing. Then the subcaps we had, we have so many FCs that are just eager to FC subcaps anyway. I don't have to FC those either. So my role is kind of done. The leading up to it, having ideas what plays could be made, just throwing in some thoughts. That's the best part for me personally. It's the best part about it. And then when the fight kicks off, my job is basically done anyway, right? So and I'm not hyped to fight till downtime either. So it was a little bit of a bummer, obviously.
I think that lead up is like one of the most awesome parts of it. I think it's just the sheer scale of it. Like I remember, for example, the second M2 fight. I wasn't planning on being in the fight necessarily because it was kind of late and I was back to work, so I couldn't stay up all night anyway. But so all of my time was spent like helping to prepare for stuff. But it gave like a similar energy to the big 6 VDT deciding factor when we put like thousands of Megatrons on the grid on the 6 VDT station. Like my role there was pinging for 4 hours or something before the fight to tell people to undock their megas, because back then if you had that many people and you undock from a station, like you would crash the server. It would take like forever for people to undock. So the whole like time was just spent shepherding people into pauses already so that they could easily bridge without screwing up the system. And by the time the fight actually started, it was like, okay, someone called targets, because like the fight was won in the preparation to it. And I think that happened with the VFK headshot attempt. It happened in 6 VDT, and now it happened in M2. And I think other than that, I've never really noticed it. But like, there's so many old school people who come back for that stuff, and there's this like kind of vibe and this energy, and it's like, okay, like this is us against the universe. Like we have everybody who's ever played this game on deck, and we're gonna theorycraft the shit out of this. And everything leads to that point in time where you have those 5,000 dudes, you have all your plans, everything is ready, and then it feels good. Like it feels good, and it feels crazy that you can tell your friends, like, yeah, we orchestrated 5,000 nerds on the same place at the same time, and then the server took a shit. Read the article,
Yeah, well, that's what I always say. Like those heavy tie-dye fights. First of all, most people join them for the story more than anything, right? It's like, it's not about the fight itself. They what?
They're just happy that they were there for it, so they can tell people that they were there.
Yeah, exactly.
Firing a Doomsday once every hour isn't necessarily the most engaging gameplay or anything.
No, I mean,
if you can run a computer with effects on, it looks pretty cool, but most of us can't. So you just sit there.
You say that as an FC who gets to decide how much he doomsdays in his life. You know what I mean? A lot of people in Titans never get to doomsday really, like effective. So for them, it's more of an event. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people probably fired their first doomsday in one of those big fights, be it BTEC R, UALX, or X47 or whatever it is, right? So that's that one time where they can actually finally use that and actually doomsday people. So like I totally get it, right? But yeah, it is the like exactly the second thing I wanted to say actually was, like, those big heavy tie-dye fights, they're usually decided before the fight actually kicks off, right? Like it's in the planning and then number game, right? It's simple math at the end of the day, right? Do you play your strengths, then you might just get around the numbers game to a degree, but you'll never get completely around it, right? Especially in the Titan stuff. It's just how it is. Yeah.
Yeah, the anticipation of it is really, I think, indeed where it gets won, and that anticipation happens in non-tie-dye. So that's actually kind of the fun part, I think, is making sure you maneuver all the pieces on the chessboard.
I think we prepped pretty well for the fight. I think that and that's the big if, right? Like the question really comes down to, would you consider it bad preparation to assume that the servers were going to hold up? If the answer to that is yes, then I would say it was bad preparation. But considering how the first one went, where there was a similar amount of people, at least at the beginning, and the servers held up pretty well, and then we had another fight before that in whatever it was, where we had even more people than that, and the server was playable. I thought it was an okay decision to think it, and I think if we had loaded, I think if the servers didn't do what they did, the first 6-7 hours of the fight would have been extremely rough. I think we obviously, you guys being set up with the Titans and the Titans didn't really matter because we jumped in out of range of the Titans initially anyways. But the fighter bomber blob being set up there, I think we would have lost probably like 30, 40, 50 Titans before we had loaded, even if we had loaded to begin with. But
Yeah.
the plan of the fight was to go much longer than it anyways, right? So we did absolutely account for losing that many Titans to begin with. Like we were ready to lose, 50, 60, whatever, how many Titans until we had properly loaded grid with all of our forces, and then the idea was to just win in the long run, sort of thing. And I think it would have been possible, but again, it's a lot of what ifs here.
Yeah,
So obviously,
Yeah, but what you say regarding numbers, I don't agree with that. Like I think if everyone had loaded it, like indeed you had the advantage that you could probably just simply snipe the Keepstar from under us, right, without us being able to do that much about it. That was your advantage of deciding where you jump in. But numbers wise, the first M2 fight topped off at like 6 point something K people, right? But if everyone was able to load the second M2 fight, it would be like 12K, like twice as much. So it's not really the same numbers there. It was a completely different ball game.
Yeah, it felt like a repeat of the $1 million fight. For those who are not aware, like there was this fight in 4-9 in Cloud Ring, and Pro got hyped the shit out of it. Went on national TV, like for like Canadian national TV or whatever, and like gave interviews and shit. Like the hype was fucking real, right? And we had this big plan of like sending fighter bombers over. Like back then, the meta about like how do you attack a Keepstar properly, it wasn't quite 100% developed yet. Right, so people were still on the whole like fighter thing a little bit. So, and then we sent the first wave of fighter bombers over, but nobody could fill their fighter tubes anymore, right? So a wave, and then you're done, right? That's it. So we couldn't kill that thing, right? It was like kind of felt like the same, but on a less significant level back then, right? But yeah. Fucking PGL, he's really good at hyping people, I have to say. I have to give it to him, right? And he didn't know, like, how was he supposed to know that like we're gonna go with fighters and then like the server's not gonna make, like, it wasn't his fault, right? Even though sometimes when Mittens talks about it, like he blames PGL for it. He didn't even have a fleet on grid, I believe. Or did he? I'm not even sure, but like he wasn't involved really. He was just from the outside hyping this fight up just for fun, right? I just found it funny. And yeah,
I was gonna say on a numbers thing that like when our FCs made the decision to jump in, I don't think they realized how many dudes were logged in. Like I agree with you that it was a different ball game, but at the time they didn't realize it. They were looking at what was already in M2, and they were looking at what we were going to jump in initially, which was about 2,000 or 3,000 dudes, which would have put us on top of the first M2, but they considered it reasonable. But when I counted up all the locals,
Casually,
like
2,000-3,000 people.
Yeah, but when I counted up like all of the locals, and I was like, guys, you realize that between all the three systems we have like 13,000 people logged in right now. There's no way that you're gonna load all of that into system. There's just no way. And yeah, I don't know. At that point, they were already too committed. It was basically like our dudes that called the shots were in the same shoes that I was in the second X47, where you've been hyping that timer for a week. You've been, announcing this huge giant showdown, even if they knew that it might have not been the best call to, like, in my opinion, the right call there would have just been to not go in, do something else at the same time. Maybe, you guys all sitting in M2, maybe go for Hems Deep or go for 1EQ, something like that, But I thought maybe they thought they were too committed to the Titan fight because that's what everybody has been building it up to. So they didn't really feel like they had a chance except to go in. So they did it anyways.
So I think
that was the reason.
What played
I think that kicked off the first M2 as well. I think it was the commitment, because I don't think the strategy of up to this point was to fight us at all. Like the strategy was to wear us down to the point where we wouldn't even be able to contest these kind of numbers, right? That was the long-term strategy here.
For sure.
So the fact that the first M2 snowballed to the point where everyone was jumping in their shit, at some point you're committed to the level, like if you back out now, like you can't do that to your dudes. It's equal numbers. Everyone's waiting for this. But I don't think it fit in the picture of the strategy up until that point.
Yeah, so what I think also played a big role was they were committed in general, just like because the Titans were there, but then also leading up to the second fight, they kept saying like it was a major win the first timer, and it was like all part of the plan, it's all fine, and all that stuff. So they committed even more to that idea that they're gonna come in and stuff. To then not follow up was a little bit more tricky, right? If it wasn't so committed, hype-wise, then maybe it could have been a different story, right? Maybe it would have been easier to say, okay, guys, look at the situation. Should we actually do this? And then maybe it would have been easier to say, like, no, actually, it was a mistake. But maybe because of that, there was that moment.
But
when the moment
but you
came,
said earlier,
people just said, like, fuck it.
But Panda, you said earlier, like, sometimes you got to put something juicy on the grid to the point where you can't resist it. I mean, there was some juice on that grid, because killing the Keepstar and forcing us into a committed fight would have been an absolutely, completely coalition-shattering event if it were to go down that way.
Yeah, that was the plan, right?
It
Like
would
the,
have.
the plan was to basically, if everything had worked, we would have killed. Obviously, the Keepstar dies because there's no way you can prevent a Keepstar from dying. You just have to keep like 5 Titans on it, and then after that, you're sitting there with all of your shit completely unprotected.
Or
It
we
would have
jump
been a
off.
2-day fight for sure. It would have been a 2-day
Yeah,
fight.
it would have
Like,
been.
we
It
would
would have
have
been
logged
after
in after
downtime. You would log back
yeah.
in.
Yeah, exactly. You would log back in after downtime 100%,
Yeah.
and
Like just
that would have
just
been
imagine the
enormous.
headlines alone, right? This would hit like mainstream media, like fucking nerds have been fighting for 48 hours now.
They're still, they're still fighting.
$100,000 destroyed.
Yeah.
You actually have to like tactically send some of your FCs to go to sleep so they wake up a couple hours later somewhat like energized. It would have been nuts.
The
I
headline is
remember when
like,
I first.
yep.
I remember when I first started playing Eve, there was a book. I can't remember what the book's called, but it was all like the early battles of Eve. And I remember like the first thing that I, learned about Eve and the Eve community was there was like this huge battle. I wish I remembered more about it, but I just remember them talking about it going on for days, people taking vacation or like not going to work because of this fight that they were like so determined to get to, IRL espionage and shit just for these wars in Eve. And I was like, hell yeah. It's a game I want to play.
I think that's really the turning point where if people read that, you either like, yeah, this is for me, or
Like,
run
what
for the hills.
What's wrong with these people?
Yeah, we all know those typical comments saying like, hey, I prefer reading about those about the game rather than playing, right? Like you see those comments all the time on like all kinds of news sites and stuff.
Yeah.
And I totally get it. Like,
yeah. I've got friends that have never played, 1 minute of EVE Online, but they follow the Reddit just because they think it's so entertaining.
It's so fun after BR happened. Like B-R was such a big thing that mainstream media in the Netherlands picked up on it, and they were writing these articles about, internet spaceship fight, this and that. And at that point in my life, I really tried to keep my real life kind of separate from my nerding habits. So then my colleagues started talking about this fight. And they were like, wow, this game looks awesome. Like, should we play this together?
No, don't do it.
Like, no, don't do it to yourself.
No.
Yeah.
So, what do you guys think? How do you get 330 Titans out of that situation, though? Like, what's the right move?
What, right now, or
how's that situation? Like, can you guys fix that situation? You think?
Yeah, I think we can.
All right, you want to give away the game plan or what?
I don't know.
All right, V, it's your turn. What do you think they're gonna do?
Well, I know what I would do, but I'm certainly not going to share that publicly because I'm enjoying this gameplay too much.
God damn.
I don't know. Like, I haven't even given it that much thought, to be completely honest. Like, I guess one is just to, set up for a fight again. Like,
yeah, that's one of the fun things. Like, I can say a little bit about this. We've been spitballing ideas, or they have been spitballing ideas in the coalition leadership on how to do this, right? And sometimes there was a notion of people coming up with ideas where this wouldn't turn into just another fight. And Vince went in there, and I went in there, and we said, like, look, you can scrap any idea from your book where this doesn't just turn into another fight. It will, whatever we do to get out, it will just turn into another fight, right? And it's something that we talk, we look, this has to be at the back of your head. Whenever you think of or you try to come up with a plan, have this be your baseline. The baseline is this will turn into another fight one way or another. And that's like, we're not gonna get out of there without fighting. We're not just gonna magically jump out with some weird tricks the way we did it in UALX, right? So it's
So
it's gonna happen.
like one of the problems that like I see is it's 330 different people, and they were in a big fight when they logged off, so they're like most likely all different time zones. The problem is you can't just spontaneously ping these guys and say like log in right now and expect like everyone to be there, right? So if you would try to bust them out, let's say you get all the bubbles killed with a sneaky fleet, right? You form 200 people and you just kill those bubbles magically, right? It's a lot of bubbles. Even for 200 people, you're going to be busy for a while. But let's just assume we're all asleep, nobody noticed, right? The bubbles are gone. Even then, you can't log in 330 people at the same time anyway, right? So there's always going to be like half of them are going to still be there, right? So you almost have to form super big and pre-hype it and like to get all these guys on. Or you just say, all right, we just commit right there on this spot, which is like most likely, like you said, gonna like have to happen anyway. But and then again it comes to the tactical part, like where do you position? Do you do like some weird plays? Like do you do some lancing? Do you do like some boson plays? Like maybe we're gonna see that kind of shit. Who knows, right? I love that stuff. Like bring it on, right?
Yes, so, high stakes games.
Imagine all of Papi logs in, but they all bring boson titans, and it's just gonna be like one wave of boson, and then they're boson their way into freedom. It would be funny, right? Like I would kind of like
fucking awesome.
I wouldn't hate it. Let's say it that way, right? So, but it's like it's there's so many things that could, and then things can always go wrong, right? Who knows?
But also, how the hell did we end like goons have had a history of like bubble camping hostiles, right? Either in stations or in pauses or whatever.
You guys are fanatics, and that's
like,
why.
all these mechanics were introduced to prevent this from happening again with tethering and whatever. And for some reason, we're here again camping some bloody bubble wrap people. It's just, I don't know how that even happened.
Yeah.
It keeps happening.
Yeah. Well, guys, I would say
so big fight it is then.
That's, I think, the next fight in M2. That's gonna be probably like it could be the last big fight in this war. Who knows, right? But yeah, I'm looking forward to it in a weird way. Kind of similar to Killah. Be like, I kind of want to be part of the fight, but I kind of don't want to be. It's like. It's going to be a good part of the story for sure, right? So I'm really curious how this is going to work out. And I think a lot of people are.
I can imagine it's a very difficult discussion to have because there's a lot of people group thinking the strategy, and
it's also a very big difference in mentality, right? Like I can always just speak for NC, but for like from our point of view, through all of this, through any sort of loss, through any sort of victory. Obviously, there's always a big moral high when there's a big victory, but none of the stuff that happened, even the M2, has really affected the NC morale all that much because Vince is a very straight up guy, and the way he does it, and the way we present the situation to our people, it just doesn't affect us as much. But I know for a fact that other parts of the coalition, they are a lot more affected by stuff like this than we are, and I think it's really about how well they can handle whatever happens next and how well they can sort of get over, the sort of hump that we've been in, I guess. And that's really what it's going to come down to, I think. Because as for NC, we're going to be fine 100% either way.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, there's a lot of like on average, you guys have like very experienced guys, so.
But it's also been very consistent. I think that's the fun. I think so much things have changed either in like big ways or in subtle ways. But I feel like NC Dot now is the same as when I quit. Literally, it's just the same group of people. They still show up. They're really consistent and everything. It's like, yeah, Vince is still there doing Vince things. It's all super familiar.
Yep.
Yeah.
Alrighty, guys. We are 1.5 hours in. That's usually where we kind of cut it. I enjoyed it very much, and I would say thanks for coming and talking. And we should do it
Let's just-
again.
Yeah,
We
let's
should
just
do.
talk again right after. Let's just talk again right after whatever happens next in M2. How about that?
Let's do that. I was about to say exactly that. I was like, let's meet again when this fight happened, and then see what actually worked out. Did everyone get bosoned? We will find out. Bosoned is probably not, because the range is too low. But whatever. Might be lances. You never know. So then, thanks again, and thanks for everyone hanging out, and whoever it was who donated, I'm gonna check that actually later. Thanks for that, and thanks a lot. Super nice, and thanks for the subs, and thanks Jebby for the big host. And you guys can get that Astero skin at the end in just 3, 2, 1. Whoops, nope, I misclicked. There you go.
Misclick end stream.
No, that's gonna come next. Alright, you guys. See you guys around.